Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for today's virtual book club. This is actually the first time that we are conducting a webinar in this format, but we felt like it would be a good way to spur discussion and some interactive components that we typically don't have as part of our webinars. And obviously, we want to ensure that everyone feels like they're part of the discussion. So I'll go ahead and move us over to the agenda for today. Really simple agenda. So we're going to have a quick introduction, and then after that, I'm going to hand it off to Bob to share his insights from the book. And then after that, we'll have our live Q&A as well. So pretty straightforward here, nothing too crazy, and really we want to be able to focus on the discussion and all the interesting points from the book. So I want to make sure that you all may be familiar with Bob, but I don't want to take for granted that you may not be familiar with his background. So Bob Goodson, he is the president and founder of Quid. Before starting Quid, he was actually the first employee at Yelp, which is actually a lot of how this all started up, and a lot of the background behind the book and the context behind it all started during his time at Yelp, which I'm sure he'll elaborate on later. This is where you played a role in the genesis of the like button and observed firsthand the rise of the social media industry. After Quid received an award in 2016 from the World Economic Forum for contributions to the future of the internet, Bob served a 2-year term on the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. And while at Oxford University doing graduate research in language theory, Bob also co-founded the Oxford Entrepreneurs to Connect Scientists with Business-Minded Students. Bob is also the co-author, as we all know, of Like, the book that changed the world, the book that we're talking about today, which details the origins of the ubiquitous like button in social media and how innovation comes about. And if you're not familiar, the book was released this past April by Harvard Business Publishing. If you don't already have a copy, please let me know. I'm happy to get a copy over to you, and it seems like we've been able to get them over within a day of when we put the orders in, and so we could have these books over to you by tomorrow at the soonest. So please let me know if you don't already have a copy. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll hand it off to Bob to share some insights from the book, and I'll go ahead and I'll take the slide down so that we can get everyone up on the screen instead of that slide. All right, Bob, off to you.
All right. Thanks, Harvey. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Yeah, we'll get into a bit of a discussion shortly. I think I'll just give you a little bit on the book. Of the first few people that joined, we found that they had not received a copy yet. So I'm guessing that perhaps at least half of the folks have not received the book or read the book yet and are coming to learn more. So I'll try and just describe kind of basically what the book is about, how it came about, and then some of the sort of key interesting findings that came about from 4 years of working on this topic of where did the like button come from. So, and then would love to hear your questions. We have some really interesting group of people coming together today, and it will be nice to hear from each of you on just who you are, what you work on, and what your interest is in social media. And yeah, and you can ask questions, and we'll have a discussion on this over the course of the next 35 minutes or so. So the book came about as it was. So first thing to know is that I played a role in the invention of the like button. Bizarrely, when I was at Yelp, I was the first employee and product manager. And what we did for the first time is that we put we put multiple reaction buttons on web content for the first time. So we had never that had never been done before. There were ways to click to interact and show appreciation for content, but no one had ever put multiple buttons. We put useful, funny, cool. We were also the first to let you click those buttons and stay on the web page instead of it refreshing or taking you to a different page. And so we made two, important contributions to the evolution of this thing that is now clicked more than 50 billion times a day around the world. 50 billion times a day, people click to show appreciation to a piece of content through the like button or some variants of the like button. You can even think about your day so far and ask yourself, how many times have you clicked that button today across the different apps that you use? So something special is going on with this button, and it found its way into our lives without any user manual, without anyone ever announcing it, and it's become very important. So, um, but when I think back to the day, and literally me and the co-founder of Yelp, Russ, spent like a few hours designing this thing and rolling it out. Um, it didn't feel important. It felt like that day's design challenge. It was a little tweak on the margins of how Yelp already worked. And and then I watched this thing spread over many years. And it was about 4 years ago, I met up with a friend of mine, Martin Reeves, and we've written some articles together before. He's the head of the BCG Henderson Institute. And I mentioned to him, this contribution that I think I'd made, and I'd found a notebook as I was moving house that had a little sketch, a pen sketch from that day's designs. And one of the options I came up with was just the word like and a thumb and a counter next to it, which we didn't choose at Yelp. But he looked at that piece of paper I'd found, and he was like, "That's 4 years before Facebook added it. Are you saying you invented the like button?" Which was just a fun and silly question. And to my answer was like, no, no, of course not. Well, I don't know. Like, I think we made a contribution, and it led us down this path of research to find out, well, who did invent it? Where did it come from? Contextualizing that contribution, which I wasn't sure about. And in the journey of writing this book, we learned a lot about the nature of innovation, right? We interviewed people like the founders of YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, and many other of these top platforms that we now use all the time, and early Facebook people. And one of the things that was kind of shocking about the research is that anybody who made an important contribution to this feature's evolution was just trying to solve that day's design problem and making little tweaks on the margin. They they weren't conscious of doing anything bigger. They weren't conscious of how big this thing could be. And that's really the nature of innovation. The nature of how anything gets developed at really any level is are these like it's more evolutionary than people typically tell the story. And because we have this story of people like Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs, now Elon Musk, kind of sitting back in a chair and, you know, like some sort of Bond villain and coming up with some, amazing new thing that changes the world. Like we like that kind of narrative, that kind of hero's journey narrative. And the media likes that narrative about how innovation works. But those of us in it, and this includes, I'm sure, everyone on this call, that it's actually thousands of hands at work, tinkering and creating and improving things in incremental ways. That's how technology really gets developed. It's more evolutionary than people think. So, in writing this book, we wanted to shine a spotlight on that. And we'll find that a lot of what we discuss is looking at different models of innovation, different eras of innovation. And then we also just trace this little icon, the thumb, and this thumbs up symbol all the way through the digital era, going back to the bulletin boards of the 1980s and 1990s, where you could vote for content. But we also trace the pre-digital history of the like button, going all the way back to the gladiatorial arenas of ancient Rome, where you may remember people kind of get together exactly in an amphitheater, and they're deciding does the fate of the gladiator at the end of the contest. And famously from the movies and from an important American painting, the idea that we've been handed from that era is that a thumbs up meant they survive, and a thumbs up meant the gladiator doesn't survive. Again, digging into that, we found interestingly that's not quite true. We know the thumb was used in these amphitheaters from accounts of the time, but it was more likely that it was a thumb across the throat, or a thumb, put angling downwards to suggest put the sword away, right? So the details of that can't be fully known, but it was definitely not a thumbs up, thumbs down. But again, like we trace that, and how did that idea of a thumbs up even come into American culture? And through the use of it by airline pilots in the Second World War who couldn't hear when they were in the cockpit, so they needed simple hand gestures to say, "Okay, I'm good to go," or "There's some problem with the plane." All the way through the 1950s. So we trace like the pre-digital era of this icon as well. The response has been incredible. It's only been out 3 months, but it's already been reviewed in Forbes and The Economist and the BBC. It was on BBC News. It's on NBC News. Um, we've been covered in the Associated Press. I mean, literally we've been in over 120 newspapers in the past 3 months because I think we seem to have really struck a chord with this idea. And I think in its simplest way, it's just that this little icon and this piece of feature, this feature that's in all of our apps, is doing something really important for us as people, you know? And what is it tapping into and making that, you know, as Harvard calls it, they're the publisher, but they call it making the familiar strange, right? And so it's 20 years since the invention of the like button. We also launched it in to correlate with that anniversary. And yeah, the reception's been incredible. Number one bestseller on Amazon when it launched in consumer behavior and marketing. And yeah, and it feels like just the start of a journey really to get to you know, for people's interest in this topic. So that's a bit on the background of the book and like why I wrote it with Martin Reeves and how it came to be and some of the initial insights. Um, I might just pause there. I mean, there's so much I could say in terms of what insights come out of the book. Perhaps some of you have read it, others just may be curious on this topic. But I think rather than say too much, I'm curious to meet you all, and so um, anyone would like to jump in and ask a question, feel free.
I'll jump in. Hey, Mom, how are you? I'm
Right.
Cleo, and I'm a professor of practice at the University of South Carolina after a very long career in public relations at AT&T, and before that, as a news producer at CNN. But was part of some exciting stuff at AT&T, including the launch of the original iPhone. And it
Wow.
was sweet when you had a 5-year exclusive deal on the iPhone.
That was a crazy deal. I'd love to meet the person
You
who did
know,
that deal.
it was
Even
hard
at
to
the
lose
time, I'm
money in those
thinking,
days.
how did they get that deal done? I was in the US for 20 years and I was there when I was in the US when the phone came out and I was already an AT&T customer. But yeah, that was quite the deal.
Yeah, it was wild. But anyway, my question actually is around monetization and did you at all foresee how the like button would become a way to monetize product, services, etc. And the just talk a little bit about the evolution of that as companies latched onto this as a measure that could actually bring in revenue and judge everything from advertising to PR campaigns, you know, all
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the journey of how it got monetized is really fascinating and gets to the heart of how social media works today. And it happened in a number of stages. But to directly answer the question, at Yelp, we certainly never imagined what would follow from when we developed this feature in terms of how it got monetized. And certainly it wasn't part of the Yelp business model either. You know, Yelp really, we knew from the start that if we could create an environment where people wanted to talk about the businesses they most loved, local businesses they love, and share those with friends and share those with the community, and be the place that people want to do that, then that was really core to our business model. So in the Yelp context, the like button was really just there to encourage community, give people a way of showing appreciation to the writers that had, you know, put the effort into to write these reviews and get those writers coming back. And we found just naturally by looking at the data that when we added a feature called send a compliment, which is a much heavier way of, you know, than the pre-like button, um, those people that got compliments were way more likely to write more reviews. So as a developer, you just say, okay, we need to make that easier for people, which is why we brought the friction down by adding the button. Um, but in terms of, but that was it. It's all it did at Yelp. You know, it was just like a way of rewarding the writers for doing good writing, or at least allowing others to reward them. And and now we know a lot more about the sort of, you know, the dopamine circuits and how that's engaged by something like getting a like from someone else, right? And the sort of proclivity for social learning that humans have that is so innate and so powerful, right? We want to learn from other people around us. But in terms of how it went into, and this, remember, is like really before even the rise of Facebook. Facebook was around at the time. We're talking 2005 here, right, when we added it to Yelp. So Facebook was around, but social it was not clear at all whether social media was really going to work out and whether there were going to be like 100 platforms and we all have multiple sites and platforms and whether one would dominate. That wasn't clear at the time. And there certainly wasn't any business and any money to be made in social media in 2005. So what followed, one of the things that's so interesting to me is skipping ahead to when Facebook added the button in 2009. It was actually core to their monetization approach because brands that were advertising, and I found this because we did some brand deals at Yelp. Um, the brands don't know for sure what they're getting by spending the money. And you can show them a report that said, you know, 400,000 people clicked on this link or 1 million people saw your ad. But in the digital world, back then, especially in the early 2000s, there was a lot of skepticism about it. You could put an ad in a yellow pages and you could take the yellow pages home and show your family and say, look, I've got my business in the yellow pages and it's physical and you could hold it. But in the early 2000s, digital was new, advertising online was new, and brands were very skeptical that it was doing anything for them. So, what liking did is it meant they could see the people that were interacting with their brand. So what it did for Facebook, they started to monetize interactions with the brand, and that sort of kicked off what became an evolution of different ways to monetize social media and monetize attention. But the like button did play a stepping stone in that. It's less important now. So all right, anyone else have a topic they'd like me to touch on?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Bob. I'm Hillary. I am a longtime user of Quid, now NetBase, almost 10 years client across different jobs. I work currently at the Ford Foundation as the senior manager for social media and digital strategy. So thanks for the book. It was a good plain read for me recently, although I'm just in the beginning, so working my way through it. Um, but yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit. It's interesting to see the sort of unintended consequence. This has definitely like reshaped the entire social media landscape. And so I wonder if you have some thoughts about the kind of psychological impact of this button. Certainly from an editorial standpoint, we have an incentive to try to create content that would generate engagement. What do we think about that
Mm,
for different places, like for news outlets or something? Maybe this has impact the angle that they take on stories. And then similarly for the user, like how this has affected, the teen girls in their sort of like psychology of popularity of content. So yeah, just wondering if you have some thoughts about those unintended consequences.
yeah, well, really nice to meet you, Hilary, and thanks for being part of our journey at Quid and previously NetBase. Um, so we have a chapter called Unintended Consequences, which is quite far into the book, so you'll get to that at some point. Um, and we thought it was important because there's so much discussion of negative effects of liking and social media as a whole, right? There's like becoming increasingly well understood. And so it's something we spent a lot of time reading and researching. And while we were doing so, there was more and more regulation that started to come out. I mean, since we wrote the book, Australia has banned social media for anyone 16 or under, which is pretty remarkable. Just blanket, just banned it for the whole country, right? There's regulation coming into the UK at the moment on social media use and smartphone use of children. Um, so it seemed to us that the direction was going to be increasing regulation around it. And of all the risks and harms, one of the challenges, just to set the framework about this, the first thing to know about it is that we still don't have any science of the harmful effects, proving the harmful effects of social media. And that's remarkable to me that in 2025, we don't have the science. So I went down a rabbit hole to figure out why don't we have the science? Is there some sort of conspiracy stopping people researching it? Like what's going on there? And it turns out that one of the reasons it's so hard to study, the central reason it's so hard to study, is that Hillary, if you were a part of a study and you volunteered and you switch off your phone for like a month, right? Then someone can study the effects of that decision on you and your life, and even at a, you know, even at a chemical and biological level, right? There's things that can be measured to show how you're doing and like, what the effects might be physiologically. However, the problem is because social media is an inherently social function, what we've just done is pulled you out of your social networks and out of your normal communication patterns with your friends and families and loved ones and community, right? And so you get this, you can't measure, you can't clearly measure the effects on one person alone. So what you have to do if you really want to study it is you have to pick an entire community and pull everybody off of it at once. And that has proven very challenging to engineer. And this speaks in some ways to the sort of to how integrated social media is into our lives and how it integrated it, how hard it is to get out of it, right? Like, and why it is so powerful and why it is such a sort of compelling product set. So I expect over time people will do these studies. Like people are trying to figure out how to do it, like taking schools, for example, and taking every kid in the school off social media at once and then measuring them over several months or even a year. That's the other thing. Like a lot of the effects are going to have to be measured over months or even years. And then you're going to have to look at those folks and say, what happened when they grew up, right? What happened after 20 years? What happened after 30 years? And this is such a new technology. That's another dimension that makes it hard to study. So I will say that right now, the science is not there to confirm any harms. However, the general public can see it. And if you have young people in your life, I certainly do. I have two children, but I also have a niece and a nephew who are teenagers right now and have grown up with this technology, and you spend time with people, it's kind of evident, like in an intuitive level, that there are some unintended or say unwanted side effects, including just spending less time socializing in person, which is so important during our development, especially as children. So anyway, what I concluded from all of this work is that the biggest area of concern is for young people, because especially during our teenage years, they're important developmental years. And, this is the first generation that's grown up on social media from the start. And that wasn't really what it was designed for necessarily. And that seems to be where most of the public attention is as well. So we talk through the latest in the regulation in the book. We talk through and we also talk through like the nature of regulation in technology, because ultimately everything that gets developed, everything we call a technology, is just a new way of doing something. It's a new way that something can be done. That's all it is. And every time you create a new way of something to be done, there can be positive effects of that new way of doing something, and there will be harmful effects of that new way of doing something. That's inherent in the nature of technology. The only way to, practically speaking, to maximize benefits and minimize harms is through regulation. So why has this been so hard to regulate compared to other things that affect so many people? Smoking was regulated for a while. When passenger planes came out, there was the most high risk way to travel. Planes crashed all the time when passenger flight was invented, and it's through regulation, through studying every time it went wrong. How did it go wrong? And then we bake those processes into the design of the next wave of aircrafts so that thing can never happen again. And over time, passenger flight became the safest way to travel per mile. So we went from like it being the most harmful, damaging, risky thing to do to the safest way you can fly. And that has only been achieved through clever regulatory frameworks. The same with the healthcare industry. We have like frameworks around how a drug can get designed and developed and tested. And then there's regulation, for example, if the pharmaceutical company becomes aware of a potential negative side effect, is regulation as to the fact they have to now go study that side effect. So there are other industries where clever adaptive regulatory frameworks have resulted in huge upside and limiting the downsides. And that just hasn't been done yet for social media. It hasn't been done for AI. And so I think there's a big open question that's worth us all engaging in, which is how do those, how do those systems get created? I suppose the best thing we do really is we vote for that stuff, right? Like we have to hold our governments accountable and make sure they're on their toes and developing, new regulatory frameworks when new technologies come out. But social media is one of those new technology areas that still the regulation is still very early, even though we're 20 years in.
Okay, so you brought up the topic of AI, so you have to have your AI question in here. So how does the like button is there an application within AI? How does AI work? What's the next phase of this, I guess, is the real question, Bob.
Mm. Yeah, well, first thing I find interesting is that the new chat applications have thumbs up, thumbs down buttons in them. So, with
That's true. Yeah.
most of the AI chat features now, you're being asked to basically use the like button, and that information is helping to train the model, um, and giving it positive and negative feedback is which can in turn train the model. The other thing that's so interesting is when you think about Facebook's data, and of course Meta has built its own massive large language model to compete with everyone, and they have a unique data asset, which is the like graph mapped to written content. So, with every message that's ever been posted on Facebook and every comment to every post on Facebook, they also have emotional reaction information, which no other company has. And we say in the book, and this came out of an interview I did with Max Levchin on this topic. It was Max that pointed out that that might be one of the most valuable assets in in the um, in the race for the best performing generative AI. Because think about it, if you built a large language model and you just throw loads of text at it, it can do a lot. But if you know this is text that resonates with people in a certain emotional way, then you can train the model to be aware of the emotional reactions that humans have to that content. And so Facebook have trillions of likes across their different products. And they even have that data from WhatsApp. Like no one knows if they're using WhatsApp to train their model, but I don't see why they couldn't. And they have a huge amount of like data across their different Meta products. So yeah, there's definitely that's going to be an interesting one to watch, and that explains why Twitter, now X, is now owned by XAI. Like why does Elon Musk's AI company own Twitter? Why does that even make sense to buy it? It made sense because of the data, right? If you
Right.
have like Grok is the app that you can all use for free, and Grok is the ChatGPT competitor that Elon Musk started, and it has Twitter data and it has live Twitter data. So that means you can ask questions about something that happened this morning that's in the news and has been reflected on Twitter, and Grok can actually give you answers about that, which ChatGPT can't because it doesn't have a live source of information yet. I
Mhm.
imagine it eventually will, but with ChatGPT, you don't quite know when its window is of knowledge. Sometimes it's quite good with things that happened a few weeks ago. Other times you can ask it a question about a major world event that happened 6 months ago and has no idea.
Right.
So, essentially that's a good example of where the like data and the social media data is becoming important in Gen AI.
Right.
Becky, you're on camera, so I will say hello and maybe you could tell us who you are and see if you have any areas of interest.
I've actually, it's funny, I just messaged Hillary on LinkedIn because we've been connected for, I think, a decade, going back to NetBase days. So it
Wow.
was just great to see Hillary's face on here, but we've been connected, I think, for over 10 years. And
Yeah.
I'm just geeking out. I have messaged my boss, who has also been using Quid/NetBase for over a decade. And I'm like, I'm on a call with the celebrity here. So I'm just geeking out. Don't mind me.
I love it. How do you and Hillary know each other?
So going way back when I worked at a global hospitality management company called Delaware North, and We actually started social listening and a social media center of excellence at Delaware North. And I met Hillary at it was at the time a NetBase Live event.
Ah, right. Wow,
So
cool.
yeah, it's interesting. Hillary asked a question because I said to my boss, I'm like, I'm going to jump on this call, but I've just always been very passionate about the psychology of social media.
Mm,
I have 7 nieces and nephews that are 15 and under, and just seeing what they go through with, it's good and bad, social media, but just seeing like my 13-year-old niece, the emotional and like the mental health aspect of being on TikTok. And, it was
mm.
just surprising. I didn't know that Australia has banned social media for anyone under 16. I was not aware of that. So, um, yeah, I know I just mumbled on a lot, but it's an honor to be on
Yeah.
the call. And I know I'd messaged for a copy of the book, and I know one's going to be sent to me, but I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for joining, Becky. And it's amazing you guys met 10 years ago. Now you're on the book.
It may
Um,
have been longer than 10 years, or like,
yeah.
actually, I think she
Well,
said 10 years, but yeah, I think it's been since 2015.
well, glad
So,
to reconnect you guys. Must be fate. Must need to work on something together.
I
Um, so, have you read Jonathan Haidt's book called The Anxious Generation?
It's on my Pinterest board of books to purchase. It's funny you mentioned that because, like I said, I don't have kids myself, but just having the 7 nieces and nephews, um, that book is
Mm.
of extreme interest to me. Just to be like the good aunt and sort of support
Yeah.
them as they're going through the challenges.
Yeah, it
So,
strikes me that that could be really important. You're someone that's worked in social media for a long time, so you're their aunt, they'll listen to you.
mhm.
And Jonathan Haidt also has a really good interview that's on YouTube with TED. And it is an interview with someone. It's not a TED talk. It's like a 35-minute interview. And I've read his book and then I watched the YouTube video and I realized like I actually got pretty much everything I got from the book in this 35-minute um, TED
Okay.
interview. So if any of you are interested in that topic, I strongly recommend just getting started with that talk or that interview of his, and then obviously you can read the book as well for more detail. But I just think, yeah, I guess it's a personal thing, but I just think like it would be better to advise our the children in our lives to
Yeah.
find a way to not be on TikTok for much longer than
Right.
15. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
we've got
I mean, seeing the 2 nieces doing the TikToks, the Target hauls and Sephora hauls, and it's just interesting, they don't have a job. And even my sister-in-laws will say, how can you afford this $32 lip gloss that's going viral on TikTok? And,
mm,
I sit here 20 plus years into my career and I'm like, I don't even spend that much on lip gloss. So it's just the dynamics are just mind blowing.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that's a good book. It's a good place to start, I think, of everything I read on this, doing the research for the book. Like his work was the best, and we actually were well into the book and well into our chapter on it before his work came out, or certainly before it was known. I hadn't heard of it. Let me see when it came out, actually. Um, I'm just looking at it now, but yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to quickly find the launch date. I should have asked Grok. Grok. Grok would tell me quickly.
Uh,
Uh, Here it is. Yeah, it didn't come out till March 2024. We submitted our final version of the book in I think September 2024. So, it'd literally been out a few months. So we had to form our own perspectives on this. Jennifer, you have your hand raised. Be lovely to hear from you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. This is really interesting conversation. I'm a director of digital strategy at FGS Global. We're primarily a public affairs firm, working with government clients. But I did start my career in journalism at a local newspaper. I'll make sure I put my hand down. And what I've been thinking about lately, and I haven't had a chance to read the book, but I'm really looking forward to it, is about the like button, particularly how news outlets, of course, are using it use social media to share, pretty awful news, especially these days. But I usually do end up liking the content, even though, obviously emotionally I'm not happy about the headline. And it just has me thinking a bit about that, but I end up liking it so that I can be served more content like that. And I'm not sure if that's just because I work in social media, that I know by interacting and engaging with the content, I'll be able to kind of follow that story and be served more in the algorithm. But I was curious your thoughts on that in general. I know you talked a little bit about how that emotional reaction can be kind of used and fed into LLMs. So it's just a really interesting concept to me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we found, you know, looking at how the algorithms work, and we do have a chapter on called Behind the Code, which I think you'll find really interesting because it is a whole chapter and like looking into what happens when you click, where does information get stored, what downstream effects are there of clicking that button. Many of them already, but even for me, and I've worked in this space for 20 plus years now, and worked with this data for 20 plus years on both sides, on the Yelp side, and kind of building the consumer apps, and then on the data analytics side with Quid. There were things that I didn't know about how TikTok works as compared to Meta and other things. So hopefully you'll enjoy that chapter. But yeah, one of the things that we found is that increasingly the algorithms are going from attention rather than liking. Initially, they were very like driven because they hadn't been built to capture attention. But now you can see from the fact you watch that whole video, say you look at a piece of news content and you watch the whole thing and it was like 90 seconds. That's a long time to be looking at a piece of content. So the algorithm is capturing that, capturing your view time. Essentially, you are creating a like without it actually clicking anything, and that is going into feeding you more content like that. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that your attention is now integral to how the algorithms work in all of the social media platforms. And yes, clicking like will also be a big vote for that kind of content. Interestingly, like one thing I think about is, well, one of the things we explored in the book is this concept that there are sort of two concepts of values. There's a way of thinking about our values as how we would like to behave, and then there's how we actually behave. And everybody, like one of the models for psychology is that we all have a gap between our idealized values, what we say we believe in, what we say we care about, and the actions we actually take. And for every person on the planet, there is a gap. For some people, it might be a really small gap, and for some people, it might be a huge gap, but there is always a gap. And social media companies know this. And so when it comes to serving content, there's content you're willing to interact with and click the button on, knowing that your friends may and will see that you interacted with that content and support it and like it, or it's part of your interest set. And then there's content that you would not want other people to know that you're interested in. And that content is likely, part of your sort of acted out values, but not part of your accepted values for yourself. And that's something that came up in the research. I found that fascinating. So social media companies and their algorithms actually know that there's a difference, and they know your differences. They know your differences perhaps better than you do. They know what that gap is. They know the things that you want to engage in, but you don't want others to know you engage in. And they know what you engage in that you are willing for others to see. So someone might be really interested in a type of cosmetic procedure, for example, and they may feel a sense of shame or about being willing to undergo that cosmetic procedure. They might not want anyone to know about that, but it might occupy a lot of their attention when they're on the social media platforms. But they would never click like on it because it's not part of their spoken value set and not part of something they'd want others to see. but the algorithms know the difference and they know when to feed you content that's in your express value set and when to feed you content that's outside of your express value set. And they actually feed you both in a very deliberate way. So there's so much interesting psychology behind the algorithms. You can't really tease apart, when it comes to social media and attention, you can't tease apart human nature from the algorithms. The algorithms are honing in on human nature, right? So if you want to understand the algorithms, you have to understand human nature. It's like, in some ways, it's like an amazing, massive study of how humans actually behave, and that's done by monitoring this data.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Then you think too about things that people share to their Instagram story, um, in terms of like activism and causes that they care about. And that's kind of interesting what you're saying about how the social media companies actually kind of know what the gap is. So like maybe you share a petition, but did you actually sign it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good example. You pass on the petition, but you don't sign it. I mean, voting comes into like the most intense way this plays out is in governmental voting processes, right? Like elections and things where people will often say one thing and then vote another way. And it's one of the reasons that elections are so hard to call, because it's like what you check in the ballot, where did you show up and what box, did you check? That's the truth. That's your lived values. Whereas what you're willing to talk about and publicly, and even with family members, is sometimes anyways, it's one of the reasons why elections are so hard to call. All right, I know we've run over a couple of minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah, I appreciate you.
Good discussion going.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And Jennifer, if you haven't received the book yet, feel free to ping me and Harvey, and we'll make sure you get one very quickly.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I did confirm with Jennifer that we'll be sending one over to her, and she may have actually been part of the batch from yesterday, but we'll double check. If not, we should be able to get you a book by tomorrow. So, yeah, Bob is kind of implying us wrapping up here. Really interesting conversation. I was actually just thinking about a more lighthearted example of the gap in observed behavior versus you actually advocating for certain things. With me, I know personally, my wife and I, we share a YouTube Music Premium account, and even though I have very different taste in music, and I know she's not actively liking things on her end, it's just her listening to stuff. I end up getting that as part of my recommendations, which I think is hilarious. And then at the same time, she gets stuff that I listen to, and she's like, "Why is this popping up in my car?" But anyway, less intense than elections. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone is also aware that if there are any, if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation with Bob as well regarding the like button or even what we're doing here at Quid. I know we have a lot of really exciting developments. We'll be sharing a lot more in the next 2 months or so. Some of you may already be aware, but you may have also seen the shift in the way that we talk about Quid on our website, as well as our materials, us being much more focused on outcomes and the way that we deliver insights and recommendations to you all. So I do encourage you, if you haven't had a chat yet with your contacts at Quid, your account managers, ask them about outcome engineering and our approach to it. And I'm sure they'd love to have a conversation with you about that. And like I said, if there's any follow-up questions, if you'd like Bob to be involved as part of those discussions as well, I know Bob is open to continuing to have these discussions with you all. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I know very unconventional format, but I do feel like there was a lot of really great conversations happening, and kind of inadvertently touching on different chapters in the book. I have my clip notes over here around some of the discussion points, and I thought it was really interesting how some of that stuff was coming up organically as part of the questions without folks having even read the book. So for those of you who don't have a copy of the book, you will have one before the end of this week. But otherwise, we'd like to thank you all again. Please keep an eye out on our events page for upcoming events, including another virtual book club that we're planning for August. And if you have any other questions, feel free to also connect with us through social media, through LinkedIn. I believe I'm already connected with a couple of folks who are on the call and were on the call earlier. But we'd love to continue these conversations with you all. So thank you all again. The recording for this will be available before the end of this week if you want to revisit some of the discussions, but we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And by the way, when you read the book, if you want to post it on LinkedIn, your thoughts on the book, and tag me, add me on LinkedIn and tag me, then I can repost that, and I can also share it with my with our clients at BCG who are behind the book, and they'll repost it too. So yeah, feel free to tag me if you get a chance to post your thoughts on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, Bob, and thank you, Hillary, Becky, and Jennifer for being part of the discussion today.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.